always dreamed of walking, from the curtains out when I'm introduced and people are clapping, right? But my introduction guy is late. So we started on time. I want that to be noted. I hate to speak in public. I like to speak in small groups, so I'm just going to talk to Brian. Is that all right with everybody? Yeah. No, Brian's leaving. There you go. I'm told you're supposed to warm up the audience a little bit with some humor. So an experience I had with Jake, we did a conference somewhere, Sacramento, and they talked me into bringing a chassis. We make the switch vehicle, and you've seen it, it's green, it's over in the shop. So I just brought a chassis in the back of my truck. We carried it into a hotel. Everything went really well. We had a good dinner. And then one of the things I've told people often is, if you want to know if you're getting old, if you fall down and people laugh, you're still young. But if you fall down and they get all panicky, you're old. So we're loading this chassis in the back of my truck, and I'm in the truck, and unfortunately I decided to step out of the truck and not realizing it was 6 feet down. So I hit the ground, and people from all over the parking lot were running to help me, and boy did I feel old. So, aging is all right though, but I do remember when we used to buy gasoline for 18.9 cents a gallon. Anybody remember that? Yeah. And I asked my dad, why is it 0.9? Why isn't it just 18 cents? And he says, well, they don't want you to feel bad, and they don't want you to think you're paying a lot for it, so they want it to be 17 cents. Now, when I pay $5.99.9 a gallon, would I feel better about that little 9/10 if it was gone, or I don't know. So anyway, I feel pretty screwed whenever I buy gas. And that's not to do with old. So my history is I worked on race cars growing up. My family was in racing, sprint car racing in Southern California. And back then, like Parnelli Jones and A.J. Foyt even, and Roger McCluskey would come over for dinner, and I didn't know who they were. I was really young at that point. But so I had a history of working on cars. But then I went to work, and I worked until I was medium age, and retired in 2005. I sold my business. I was a computer engineer, and I decided I wanted to make cars. I wanted to go back to what was fun. So I started to research and convert cars. That turned into a position at the community college where I, does this work? I don't know. Where I ended up teaching kids how to convert gas cars to electric. And speaking back to your questions earlier about certifications and qualifications, I had none. I was teaching kids how to build electric cars, and I had been doing it for 3 years, but I didn't have any certifications. In fact, I went in and asked them, they hired me for the job, and I said, okay, where's the curriculum, or what do I teach? And they said, whatever you want. And I asked them where the textbook was, and, pick one out. And I said, well, where's the car and the batteries and the motor and everything? And they said, well, we don't have that yet. So I'm in there teaching how to build electric convert gas cars to electric, and we had nothing. We were in the auto shop building, but we were not on good terms. The auto shop people just would come over every now and then and shake their heads and things because electric cars were still pretty early. So that's what I started out with. When was that? Right around 2007. And we started converting electric cars, and what I found was we could never get one done in a semester, so I had to fail students. They asked me to, so they could come back the next semester and do it. It was the only way they could take the class twice. So I did that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through, perhaps. And then in California in 2008, I think it was, maybe 9, the government decided to shut down almost all what we call elective programs in California. So we lost our funding for the alternative fuels program, and they cut us off. So I took my knowledge, because while I was there, I kind of determined that I could do something a little quicker, and I wanted to have a way for a student to build an electric car in a shorter period of time and get all the experience. Learn about the components of the electric car, learn about high voltage and high voltage safety, wiring. I had a great story about wiring, and this is the primary reason. If you buy the switch, every wire is terminated and labeled, and it tells you where it's supposed to go. I had this kid, he was, and you all know that some of your students are really into it and going to work hard, and you just give them an idea and they go with it. And this kid, I said, okay, wire the dashboard. So he went out and he did, there was 30 wires that he had to cut and terminate and everything. And we started plugging them in and nothing worked, and everything looked beautiful. It was all, the heat shrink was perfect. Well, nobody had told him to strip the insulation off the wire before he terminated it. So I had nightmares about shipping vehicles out all over the country and having kids forget to strip the insulation, and then I have to help troubleshoot it. What do you know, it's crazy. So every wire is color-coded, terminated, and everything, so you plug it in. And again, we've had teachers say, that's too easy, make it harder. And I said, that's your job. My job is to get you trained to do that, and you can go ahead. Nobody's elected to do that. They all use our harnesses. But, there we go.
That was me, so just point it at me if you want me to advance the slide.
Okay.
That one?
We'll go backwards now.
Oh, hey, that worked. We're double teaming it. There we go.
So my main goal here was to get a couple chuckles. That's how I rate my performance. If I can get a couple chuckles, I did okay. So I want to thank Ed and Jake. Is Ed here? Sam here? Anybody here?
No, I'm the only one who got.
You're
I drew
the
the
only one.
short straw. I had to come out here.
Well,
So just
I want to thank Jake.
For those of you who don't know, Dactic is a family company. So Ed's my dad, Sam's my youngest brother. We got his wife in on it too, and an uncle who, if he's not here yet, he should be. He hit some weather.
That's enough. We're done with you. I want to thank Jake, because I walk through the lab, I see the people. It's great to get this organization going, and I think we ought to thank him for doing that. And using technology to have, what a great panel that was. I only saw the last few minutes because I couldn't find a friggin' thing in this school. I don't know.
You can thank me for that too. So
yeah, I was going to thank you later. But, and I also want to, there's no light. I'm going to have to take this back. Anyway, I wanted to thank Brian, Kinney, and AJ, who've actually integrated the EV program into their program, and they have an impressive program up there at Cherry Creek Innovation Center. And really, thanks to you all, because working with you guys, and I look at the teachers that I work with are all energetic and looking to continue to improve. They're not that slacker that you talked about in the earlier session that didn't want to improve his skill set. Man, you got to improve your skill set, because if you don't, the world's going to pass you by. If all you knew had to do is adjust the points with a feeler gauge, you're history. So anyway, thanks to you guys and all your kindred folk. So when I've talked to people about integrating electric vehicles into their program, it's really mostly about why do you want to do it. And another story. Because I had taught, I realized that I had no chance anywhere in the known universe to sell this product to auto shop teachers if I didn't train them on how to do it. So we started with workshops. And we had our first workshop. We had 5 people there. I was pretty excited because we hadn't even released the product yet. So we had 5 teachers. And generally, I like to have people stand up and say, hi. You know, we have a list of questions. What's your name? What's your school? Why are you here? And what do you want to get out of the program? So first guy stands up. This is the gospel, according to me. Mike. My name is Mike. I hate electric cars. I'm only here because my boss bought your program, and if I didn't come, he was going to fire me. At that point, I was a little worried about my business plan, but throughout the workshop, Mike changed his attitude a lot, and it was really a good reinforcement that people do become complacent and they do get comfortable with what they know, and sometimes it's difficult to step out beyond your comfort zone. So you guys, if you proceed, you're stepping outside your comfort zone. You got to realize that. So, but I asked him why, and blah, blah, blah. We went on and went through it, and we went through those 5 instructors, and they had a great time. Mike was, by the way, the last one to get his car. I wasn't in a hurry to get him his electric vehicle, but he was the first one to get it done. He sent me videos. It was really a good relationship. But there's a lot of reasons. I flew back from a conference a few years ago, back from Michigan somewhere, and I sat next to a guy who did advertising for automotive people, and I asked him if they were worried about the electric vehicle or how that was going to affect dealerships, and he said, it's no big deal. It's less than 1/10 of 1% of the market. And well, now the market's changing. If I had a pointer, I'd point at that. There's some important numbers up there. But there's more and more electric vehicles are coming out. Tom was here earlier. He's excited about putting in charging stations. I went to Italy on a vacation a few years ago. And I stepped out of this magnificent train station, and the first car that went by was a Ferrari, and I thought, well, this is going to be a nice trip. The next car that went by was a Tesla. I was really surprised. Almost every block had a charging station of one sort or another. This was 6 years ago or so. So the rest of the world is moving on, and we've got to get prepared. If you look at what different people say, I had a Trump joke here, but I don't think I should do it. What do we expect? They're looking at 83.6 million cars next year, and they're saying, according to this slide, that 30% of them are going to be electric vehicles. In the U.S., according to this, and I showed the source there, there's 3.5 million cars going to be built or were built in 2021 and delivered, but 15 million trucks. Does that seem right to you, that there's 3 trucks for every car? Yeah? Yeah. So trucks are very popular, but we can see what happens if the global shift follows. We're going to have more and more and more of these electric cars around. And in my effort to prepare ahead of time, I was actually working on the presentation. You can see right here on the airplane on the way over. So I was doing it early. And the guy next to me was reading the Wall Street Journal, and GM is trying to make their EVs. Well, their goal is to do 9 a day. Their backlog on this Hummer is 180,000, and they're going to do 9 a day. And then they're going to get out there, and somebody's going to have to take care of them because they're having a lot of problems. They're moving really fast. And I think maybe you would agree that might be one of the reasons why everybody kind of resents Tesla in the old school automotive world. He's making them move fast, and it's not really an industry known for moving really fast. So, again, my pointer's pointing at GM. We bought a little Bolt. It's fun. Auto sales fall sharply, but EVs increase. Same newspaper. So if you're a technician, the first few years those cars are going to be under factory warranty, but they're going to come to you eventually. And is it time to panic? Because we're not keeping up with the demand. Who's going to fill that void? Well, Switch has really stepped up. We did a 60 last year. This year we're projecting 104. So we're going to really make a dent in the needs. Also, we're at 36 for our first quarter, which is more than we did for the first 5 years combined. I'm not getting any humor, so I'm going to stop with the jokes, I guess. Anyway, more good reasons for bringing the EVs into your auto program. Generally speaking, I do well with questions and answers, so if you have questions, I think there's some method for getting a mic and interrupt anytime you want. There's a question that people ask every time we do a presentation, and the question is, will the students get a certification? Will they get a certificate from taking your program? And I say, sure, we'll print one. Is there a certificate? Right? ASE has the L3, right? But you have to take some pretty serious courses ahead of that before you can even take the L3 test. So there's no way we can really issue a certificate. I know SAE is working on some pure electrical certificates, but again, the industry's moving really fast. And the people designing these EVs, they're pretty smart people, and they're not able to get it right. So there's a lot of other benefits to bringing in the EV program. Why should you do it? I think it's because you can actually drive the certification process. You can actually have input now. We're at the infancy of this thing, and the sooner the powers that be are made aware of your concerns from a technical support standpoint and a logistical standpoint, the better regulations they're going to write, the better communication there'll be throughout the process. When I took my Chevy Bolt in to have its battery replaced because it was a problem, I asked the service guy if we got a new battery or a used one. And he looked at me like I was some kind of dummy and said, "We're not going to give you a new battery. We're going to take all these used ones and put them together and give it to you." Well, I don't want that then. Ours is pretty good. And so the owner came by and said, no, they're all new batteries. You can look in the boxes. But they didn't know in their own organization. The lack of communication through these professional organizations is just dismal. Should that guy be working anywhere near our cars? I don't know. So let's get involved. Let's start early, lobbying for what needs to be done from your perspective. I don't know. So yeah, there are countries that have come on and said, we're not going to sell anything but electric vehicles. Sweden started a program a few years ago where they wanted everybody to buy their second car had to be an EV. And then it actually went over so well that people were buying their first car as an EV. So, so the training, this is a tough one. Staying relevant, adding prestige to your program, being thank you. I'm going to get into some of the badges you can get, but I have recruiting students, but it's also, if you're an administrator, recruiting teachers, because teachers, I think there's a new breed of teacher now that really wants to get the latest and the greatest and keep learning and keep teaching and staying relevant. So you're recruiting teachers. There is so much money for grants out there, and people ask me about writing grants. I don't know anything about it, but we have a great resource here for funds and support with grant writing. So,
Jake, will you give us some kind of information as far as that, as far as accessing some of that?
Yeah, so we've got a bunch of information on our website, but I'll be doing a session after lunch. So there's 284, I lose count, $284 billion in COVID funds that were given to education. A lot of that is still unspent at the school level. We're going to be talking about that in that session. Just real quick, by raise of hands, who is interested in learning about the money later today? Okay, then I don't know what room I was scheduled in, but that's pretty much everybody. So if you're in heavy vehicle, please go to Rory's session because it's going to be fantastic, and I don't know anything about hydraulics. We won't be talking about that here. And we've flown them out from Salt Lake for that, so please go to that if you're heavy vehicle, and I'll circle back with you. Otherwise, come here and I'll show you how you can look up what your district or your college received and what is left if you're post-secondary. The reporting even shows that. So, and we'll walk through some use cases on how you can request the funds and stuff like that, but that'll be later today.
It's a really interesting time we live in. I remember seeing the bumper sticker that you might have all seen is like, how come when the Air Force, right in this article here, they're talking about a $2 billion motor for an F-35. Why does the Air Force always have money to do whatever they want, but a school needs to do something, they have a bake sale? We've seen all those, right? In order for you guys to do your job, you have to do your job, but then you have to also get the funding for it. It's really crazy. So other benefits of hands-on learning and this shift in the paradigm from typical auto shop to project-based auto shop is working in teams, working maybe in a little more industry-like standard where you work with teams, you file reports, you report to your boss, things like that. And so there's Lots of reasons why. Does anybody have any reasons why they're interested in doing this? I presume you're interested, you wouldn't be here.
Because that's where the world's going. It's just, you know, it is what it is. I mean, fossil fuels is going to end eventually. It's just going to happen.
That's a good reason. I think that's under environmental stewardship. But yeah,
Terry there too.
yeah, you brought up a good point. He says keep classic cars on the road. And there's a huge business in converting old cars or old classics or even just emotional cars that people have a tie to. I had this couple that came in and they brought a really old Chevy, not the Suburban, but it was smaller than that, but they wanted me to do a conversion and be able to go 100 miles, and I told them, you know, it's like $75,000, and you couldn't buy a car. And this woman said, oh, I really want it. So I ignored them for a while. They came back. I said, I looked up the price of your vehicle. It's worth $1,500. And she says, I don't care. I want to do this. And they did. They spent $75,000 and got their car that would go 100 miles. And that wasn't a classic. That was an emotional thing that they really wanted to keep it on the road. And from an environmental standpoint, the best thing we could do environmentally without getting too much on the environmental side is recycle. It takes a tremendous amount of energy just to make the car. So if you've got one that's already made, you just need to repurpose it. It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of cars out there that would do well. So I'll show you something about that in a minute. Any other reasons why you guys would be interested in doing this? Yes, sir.
To educate himself so that he's able to do it and understand himself.
You know, when I started a company called Make Mine Electric, and you saw that up there, and we had like a 4-hour course on just how to talk to a car salesman, because they don't know anything, you know, and just knowing how things work, and even Tesla owners and a lot of owners now don't really know. In a gas car, we go miles per gallon, right? That's a big thing. You know, if I'm looking at two cars that are the same, and this one gets 28 and this one gets 22, I'm going to go get the 28. Well, how do you do that with an electric car? What's the measure? What's the unit of measure? It's miles per kilowatt hour. So, like our Chevy Bolt with a bad battery was getting, we could drive 4.7 miles on 1 kilowatt of energy. And 1 kilowatt is somewhere between 10 cents and 40 cents. So you could calculate how much things were going to cost. But people lie, but that's what it comes down to. It's finding out how to talk, what the terminology is, how it all works. How do you do it? Well, talked about this a little earlier. You can get a medallion. How many of you would like to have a Tesla in your program? Okay, what would you do with it? Would you take it apart? I mean, it's scary. How many of you work with 500 volts DC current? Okay. These guys, you should talk to them before you get so excited about ripping into a Tesla. But any of them are really running a high voltage. And that's certainly a good way to go. It's very prestigious to have one of these medallions. And I know Rivian is working really hard with schools across the country because I'm getting interest from a school that's near a Rivian plant, or a school that's near a battery manufacturer that's making them for Rivian, or so they're getting tuned up for that, and that's certainly a good way to go. But in reality, I don't remember who it was, but one of the guys in the squares up here a little while ago said, they're mandating us in high school to teach them to be whatever it is, a certified level 3 mechanic. Is level 3 good or level 1 good? I mean, they want to have qualified mechanics out of high school, but what the dealers want are people that show up, people that can do assembly work, they're clean, they're courteous. That's what they want, and then they teach them into their program. So what education's job is to get those students prepared for that job. I got my first job as a computer operator, and it was back in the 80s, and it was me and another guy, and I had worked as a lab assistant, so I had hands-on experience. I got the job, he didn't, and here I am today. So there's just getting experience is good, however you go about it, even with the Tesla or the Rivian or some of the other medallions. There's also the generic method, which is what our community college did, which was just teach kids how to convert gas cars to electric. And that's a really cool process. There's more to it than just taking out the gas. And then other things are to get some sort of certification program going so that your mechanics are trained. And I don't know how that's working. I know SAE is doing a lot towards certifications through schools. So again, you get ready-made kits, you get manufacturer medallion, you can do YouTube learning. So there's the switch. There's kits that you can buy from EV West. I don't know what happened to this slide here. I'm pretty sure that was important information, but it got obliterated. I don't know. I didn't have time to work on it. So. What?
Was the bug air cooled?
Air Google?
Air
Yeah.
cooled?
Air cooled. Yeah. Yeah. Go back to the bug. Yeah, it's that's a charger up on top, and that's just a fan on the charger. That's a Elcon 1500 watt PFC charger. We did a lot of those kind of cars. I started doing conversions with old Porsche replicas. So we took these motors and bolted them onto the transaxle, put cells everywhere within the car that we could find a space. And I got a lot of flack for that because people said I was destroying this beautiful car because it didn't make any noise. But I liked it because I could actually talk to the person I was with.
I fixed it. Do you want to play either of those videos or anything?
No, I don't. You can.
He needs to make sure that anyone who says that,
I don't know what's going on.
back to childhood and put their playing cards in the spokes of their bicycle.
So Todd said that you need to remind anybody who says that they what it was like when they were kids and they put playing cards or baseball cards in the spokes of their bicycle to get the sound there.
Yeah, all right. That's true.
So there are solutions, but I was on I was not on. I saw a panel discussion where the reply to somebody who said, "Well, what if I really miss the sound and the smell of a hot rod?" He said, Well, I tell those people that they're more interested in sounds and smells than they are in speed and power, which is, kind of a hard dig there, but there's a place for both. But I think it's kind of silly when people are sticking their playing cards in their spokes, so to speak.
At SEMA last year, there was a guy had a really nice booth, and what he had was the sounds of different cars, and he had a Ford EV, and you could go up and, if you touched the car, it would play a sound, and it would sound like it was hauling while it was parked. And, so you're gonna have to page because I'm stuck here.
Okay.
So somehow we're on the wrong page.
Sorry, let me. Okay, now try.
Okay. So, let's play the one that's highlighted on the top.
Okay.
I think these are kind of dated now.
The limited speed, 1 minute.
Limited speed, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay.
I hear you're a horror fan. It's been said.
Now playing.
That wasn't as good of a burnout, but
That car's White Lightning, and it's been around a long time. He's got some pretty fun videos where he's driving in the street and this Camaro comes up to him and makes fun of his car, so he challenges him to go to the drag strip and blows his doors off. But he's got like a $200,000 car there. Let's see. Click on the cool of limited cool, just the cool part. That's a site that we're starting to train. That's not what's supposed to be there, but to train people to do ICE to EV conversions. But we can get rid of that. That's not what I wanted.
Okay.
Limited passengers. This is a bus, I believe it's called the Whispering Wheel, and it was a bus in Europe, and they were getting 4 miles per gallon, and they put in a diesel TDI motor with a genset and a battery, and diesel motors can be really efficient like any gas cars if they're right in their peak zone. So they got the TDI motor operating in its optimal RPM, drives a genset, and they raised the same route, same drivers. They went from 4 miles per gallon to 18 miles per gallon. So that was a big win for everybody. And that was one of the first diesel electric buses. Trains have been running diesel electric for a long time, so it's a pretty solid efficient technology. I think that's going to do it for that one. So there's some good books. This one called Convert It by Mike Brown. Mike Brown was a real early adopter, and he used to go around to cities and invite people in, and they would do one of these Volkswagen conversions in just a few days. They do it at a shopping mall or various different places. And he's really wrote a good book on how to do a conversion. It's all lead acid based, but the principles are the same. You want to balance the weight. You want to keep the gross vehicle weight right. All the safety features. Build your own electric vehicle is a really good one as well. And then just the car manuals for each of the cars you want to build. And even if you want to build your own, there's some good kits like the Lotus 7. That would make a nice EV. And this should be wiggling.
I can make it wiggle. Here we go.
I used a little designer in PowerPoint, and it reads the slide and it puts something up there. So it said the Switch Lab, and it had all lab stuff. So this is something that was going to blow up, I think. But anyway, I'm good for questions, and then we do have a really good panel here who has gone through the auto shop, incorporating EV in, and it's going to be a really good session if you ask questions. Although Kenny can talk, we just wind him up. He's worse than me. So,
I've got a question while the three guys from Cherry Creek come on up. So you mentioned 3 different ways of getting into EV in your shop, at least that I caught. So you've got your standard, you bring in a Tesla or a Chevy Bolt or something like that. Number 2 is some sort of a conversion project. And then number 3 is something like the Switch, where you're building it. It's something designed for education. Could you speak to the pros and cons of each of those different systems? We got chairs for you guys over there.
Okay.
I'll probably lose my train of thought by the time I get through with the first one, but I'll try. So the first one was getting a medallion and working with a car company. The pros of that is obviously it means something to your school, means something to your program, and it's really relevant. It's a pretty easy sell to the admin, so it does get you started. The cons are most car manufacturers do a really great job of hiding everything. Everything's in boxes, and all the cabling is hard to follow. That's also a pro because you'll be using a manual and you'll download the stuff from Tesla. So it's a real world thing, but it is pretty specialized. And that's kind of the con. Another one of my little stories, when I started my computer career because I got married, and my wife decided that since I'd been a cook and a restaurant manager for years, I should stop doing that and get a respectable job. But I moved and I applied for a job at Sizzler, and they said, oh, you've got a really good resume, but we train people to do everything our way. We only do our way. And so what most of the employers are looking for, if your focus is getting somebody employed, is working on showing up on time, taking an occasional bath, being able to communicate and work well with others. Having some experience is great, but they want to bring you into the program, see what you can do, and then let you advance. And that's the model that most employers are taking, and it makes a lot of sense because they do things their way. The second one was doing the EV conversion. I really like the conversion part from an emotional standpoint and a recycle and an environmental standpoint. We have so many cars out there that would make really good EVs. When I was doing the conversion business, the challenge was, as a small buyer, I was paying 8 to 10 times more per kilowatt for my battery than Leaf or Tesla or anybody. So, you just couldn't compete. You could only work on the market that had an emotional tie to a vehicle, or they just wanted to burn out. I got some really cool video of some burnout cars we did, but but it teaches a lot. It demands a lot from you as an instructor because you've got to do all your own wiring. You have to integrate in with the existing system, and you have to retrofit everything and keep within the bounds of the gross vehicle weight and distribution within the vehicle. So there's some disciplines there. So pros, it's really good for the environment, and I think eventually there'll be a really strong market for it as soon as we can get batteries at a reasonable price. And the third one is getting a kit or a trainer. Again, my focus on building the switch was to prepare students for education and to get students interested in working in that technology, whether it be as a technician or an engineer. Again, harking back to my computer business, I started in 1970 as a computer programmer. Very small segment of the population was doing that. In the 80s, they came out with kits, ironically, of computers, the microcomputers. And then all manner of people started programming computers, and all manner of, what's the word? It's easy. Development and ideas and progress was made because there was such a large sample of people looking at everything differently. My goal, I was really naive back then when I was younger, was to get more people working on EVs because we'll make much more progress. And so having said that, one of the values of getting people in and building the switch or building a car and getting it done and working in a team is that cooperative mentality that goes through building a project. It's just, you've all done it, you can't replace it. And everybody has to rely on everybody else. You also have a really good, if you choose wisely, you have a good support team that's going to take care of you through the process. So, did I get all your points?
I think so. I've got some others, but to piggyback on the conversion option, at SEMA, a gentleman, I can't remember his name, Kirk from AEM.
Kirk, AEM, yeah.
So he was on the panel, and a room full of guys who were interested in doing conversions. One of them said, what should our response be if we have customers who are pushing us into doing an EV conversion? And he said, you should be terrified. That's a non-trivial project. It's a bad way to learn initially. Let's put it this way, it's a high-risk way to learn because you could create something very dangerous as your final product if the engineering is wrong on the rest of the steering and suspension. In contrast to that, if you've got something that isn't designed for the kind of torque that you're going to get from an EV, it's potentially a death trap right out of the gates, even if you do it correctly from an electrical standpoint. So there's that, but he recommended that you start with some sort of a kit car that has a full set of instructions, curriculum, all that kind of stuff, training from somebody who knows what they're doing on it before you get into conversion. So it's from one standpoint, even if you were to get into a project like that, which would be an amazing one to do, having something that's a little bit more turnkey, a lot more turnkey, that's the benefit there, is you've got somebody holding your hand, making sure that the engineering is correct on everything else and all the curriculum that goes with it. Which, of course, the curriculum is one of the big holes. If you've got curriculum that's designed specifically for a kit vehicle, that's a heck of a lot different than having to come up with your own curriculum that ties into a production vehicle like a Tesla or a Bolt, even though they supply a great deal of service information that you've got to learn. If you're just trying to get people exposed to how an EV works and you want that visibility of a system that doesn't have everything hidden in boxes and tucked away under body panels, that's a couple more trade-offs there.
Yeah, Kirk's a really good guy. He's been a good supporter of ours. Well, I want to thank the panel. You guys have been great.
We still have about
how
we
much
still
time
got
we
about 25 minutes.
Okay. So it's going
we've
to work
got-
if you guys got questions. You got a mic out there? Or?
I've got a mic right here.
Give it to Kenny because you can go either way.
Do you have any training that instructors can do, like on their own? Any recommendations that that would be a good, asset for us to learn a little more? I mean, I ended my career just a couple years ago. I shied away from the electric vehicles. I was forced to do it at GM a little bit towards the end of my career, but of course we had specialized techs that were doing most of that work. So, I mean, I know enough to get myself in a lot of trouble, but I know how to be safe about it and what wires not to touch and that kind of thing. But is there somewhere you could recommend we go to where we could start off with at least a good general understanding of it before we dive into some more technical training?
I'm gonna comment on one key thing. What's your name? Clint? What Clint said. He was working on it. He was an automotive technician at GM, and the specialized techs that were working on the battery interfaced with him somewhat. And I think that's sort of the problem is an automotive tech, like the Hummer thing, is water's leaking into the battery. Well, an automotive tech might have said, well, you need to have more dampening. You might need to do this, run this hose this way. Whereas the battery guy, so specialized, they don't know what it's like. They don't know when you hit a pothole, you get 8G, you get a lot of stuff going on. So that's where having the synergy of a group, and they all bring things together. One of the things, bring their experiences together. And what I keep telling my group is none of us are as smart as all of us. So you've got to have that good team, and that's what we all should be after. But to address the training, I don't know. I know there's some good online introductory stuff, but I don't know if you're familiar with anything.
Do you just want us to share how we got into these cars real quick? Yeah. So we were the same way. We had no real training on EVs. It was a little scary, right? There's nothing out there to really get into it. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Right. So that's how we felt too. So here's our evolution into it. Our superintendent kind of pushed the envelope a little bit with Peter, met him somewhere at a convention, and then she said, what about these EVs? She had some grant money. We went right down the rabbit hole with Switch Lab, and a bunch of us got trained. So the 4 auto instructors in Cherry Creek, Larry and Gary, and the 2 of us, and the 3 aviation instructors, their logic was there's electric planes now too, and they're right there at Centennial Airport, a mile away from our campus, and they've got a partnership with the electric EV company, or electric plane company. So we went down the rabbit hole, and the cool thing was we took the instructor workshop training. It was a week long, and all of us got to assemble the car out of boxes. So we got to see the whole process, and that really was comforting, right? It took a lot of the anxiety away. The batteries are about 100 volts, so it's not like instant cooking. It's more slow cooking. If you touch things, it takes a little while longer. But you get a huge comfort level when you get to assemble the car, you go through the curriculum. And what we found was, since then, it's 2 years later now, since then, if we had an issue with anything in the car, Donovan, his engineer, that came out and taught with us, and then Peter came out. But CJ Whelan taught the class for a week that we took, and he had converted his own BMW. And so he had all of that experience too. So it's no joke. They back up what they do, and it's kind of like we're all kind of in an experiment together. He throws the cars out here that are really great kits, and then if there's an issue, he backs it up immediately. The engineer's on the phone, we can get a hold of him right away. If there's a flash for the BMS, we can get that right away. If we screw something up, they can fix it. UPS, a few days out right away. So that's my experience with it. And definitely, when our students have taken them apart and put them back together a couple of times, that was the scariest part of us. Like, is it going to run? And typically it doesn't. So then that's where the learning comes in for us and poor AJ. So AJ is one of our students that graduated. He's now our student technician. And now he's becoming the resident expert on them because we'll stay after school and it's like, why doesn't this thing run? What did they do? And we have to figure it out and diagnose it. And therein lies the experience for us to learn the EVs. So we're getting more and more comfortable with that platform.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I didn't know much either coming in, and that really pushed us. I know was it Bob that said something about, I want to push myself to learn a little bit more, and this allowed us to do that, which was cool in relatively safe environment, I would say, because we do have we have a Leaf and we also have a Highlander hybrid, which are great, and we use, for high voltage disconnects and stuff like that, but it's like, how far do you want to go with something like that? Because I don't know anything about it either. But as far as training goes, I know Toyota and Ford offer, some online stuff about their specific systems. So maybe going down the track like that if you want to learn a little more. And it is kind of like, where do you learn it other than the manufacturers? Because, other than researching, Google and stuff, and kind of just learning on your own, it's kind of tough. So, do we have a question over there?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is safety this
Hold on, Todd.
Yeah,
We need to all hear you.
Hold on, Todd. Hold on.
Is safing this switch vehicle the same as a typical electric or hybrid vehicle?
Great question. I'm going to pass this over to Peter.
Is safing Switch Lab car the same as any other vehicle?
Well, we follow the standards. We use orange. One of the things you learn through the process is each wire has a different voltage regulation. We adhere to what I would consider safety standards. We have contactors at the most positive point. We have a contactor in the middle, so we split the voltage up. We have an inertia switch, so if you hit a bump or you have an accident, it opens up all the circuits, so there's no high voltage in the vehicle. But there is no real standard on what it's supposed to be. We are now looking at adopting the SAE standards because they have one more contactor than we do. We don't have one on the negative end. We only have it on the positive end. So, and we now are providing all the gloves and the pole and everything else that's associated with the safeties that's required. So.
Just to add one thing, if you could mention the way you've got the battery configured there with the solenoid to, that whole thing.
Right, there's a contactor that always opens up all the circuits. So there's no high voltage through the car when it's sitting there. Go ahead.
Quickly, just a quick plug for Clint. I'm looking to open a hands-on training facility to kind of train the trainers and then to feed people into programs like, the stuff that you guys are all teaching there. I'll be hosting a conference in August here in Golden, Colorado called State of Charge, which I would encourage you all to check out, soc23.com. In the meantime, though, I do have a question, Peter. I'm wondering about the modularity of your application in terms of as technology changes a little bit, moving away from prismatic to pouch cells or solid state eventually, what do you have to address those kinds of, technology's always changing, obviously.
AJ, you want to take that one? I'm sorry. So the question was, is the vehicle upgradable to new technologies? The answer would be yes. We have options for increasing the range of the vehicle because it's not built for range. We have options for pretty much anything you want. We are experimenting with different cell packs. So yeah, it is upgradable. In fact, for people that buy the DC kit, they can actually buy an upgrade to the lithium permanent magnet motor kit, and the basic car stays the same. They only need to buy the lithium battery and the associated battery management system and everything else. And I'll let the cat out of the bag here a little bit, but we are introducing CAN bus technology with that more broadly. We use CAN bus to communicate between the battery management system, the charger, and a dash, an Android dashboard that we have. But we're also integrating the AEM product line where it'll be a different wiring set because you'll have PDUs in the front and PDU in the back, and it'll control all of that through the CAN bus with the vehicle control module. So the kit is evolving already as we speak. And that's primarily due to the teachers because when we started, again, remember my goal when we started the Switch Lab was to get auto shop teachers teaching about electric cars. Well, we've done that, and now they're saying we need more. So the platform's going to expand and include the AEM CAN bus, VCU, and all of that. It's all available through DACTIC, 1-800-DACTIC. Yes.
One quick note: I know Weber State. This next question, they do tear down Teslas and do a total rebuilds. Most, at the university level, you can do stuff like that, and maybe some colleges are capable of that as well. But most people aren't. So this is obviously not an either-or proposition. The Switch is very complementary with the Tesla. Now I'll give the microphone to the guy you actually want to hear from.
Hi, Scott from Weber State. We offer some EV training as well if anybody wants to talk to us. From the panelists, what kind of time frame, like how long does it take to build the vehicle from completely disassembled? And from a high school perspective, we work with several high schools. Could they do it at a high school, do you think?
The cool thing about this kit is when we put it together, all the wires were in packages. We had to put the entire thing together, and it's a solid week to do it safely and with a team of teachers and the head guy. But you can keep things modular, like you can keep the battery pack modular, you can keep the dashboard modular and not disassemble the whole thing. So we've tried it different ways. We had one team take it completely apart, and we were all sweating the whole time that happened, and AJ was around to help pick up those pieces. But yeah, so you can regulate it that way. One of the cool things about the Switch Lab is Peter makes a kit. He makes a tabletop kit, a relay board, and that's the thing that really kind of brings the students from basic electrical trainers that we might use, series and parallel on the desktop, into the world of EV, because it's essentially the electric motor, the switches, and a bunch of the relays from an electrical schematic. So they build this thing off of the schematic that they're terrified of at the beginning of the project. A couple days later, they feel pretty comfortable. And then that entire schematic relays right to the car. So then when you're building the car, you can go, okay, remember that key switch relay or that forward reverse relay? That's exactly like it was on the board.
I have a thought about that. That's some great conversation about the safety around electric vehicles in general, especially with kits and working with programs that are working on OEM vehicles as well. By the way, I'm a fan of Weber State. That's my alma mater, by the way. So I appreciate their program and what they have. It's very, very advanced. John Kelly runs a fantastic program there. I represent ICAR. Many of you in the room may know ICAR. I'm the Northwest Regional Manager. Right now, I want just the group to know about safety in general. wherever it is you approach, what your entry point is, whether it's through a kit program like this, which I think is fantastic. I think it's a great place to enter and get that hands-on. But if you just want to know a little bit more about just what you're stepping into on the safety side, ICAR has a series of classes, online classes, to identify the proper procedures to zero out the potential on a vehicle so you can handle it safely, so you can identify the problem parts of the vehicle, to be very, very careful about what you're touching and what you're not touching. It goes in a little deeper than if it's orange, don't touch it. And so I just wanted to make people just aware in general. If you wanted a clearinghouse, just a quick look at some very important information and data on safety, ICAR has several classes that are online that you should avail yourself of, and then from there, and understanding the safety aspects, is then jump into something like this so that you're not figuring out your safety on the fly, but that you have good background before you even start spinning wrenches or touching anything. So I just wanted to make that aware to the group in general. If you know ICAR, we've got a bunch of stuff right there. And it goes deeper as well, but I want to just tell you about the safety part first before you jump into anything.
Just wondered, Brian, did you guys strip the insulation off?
One quick question, then I'll pass to Tom, because I know many of the college instructors that I've talked to have had this question. We've established that it's a great entry point if you know nothing about EVs. What about post-secondary? What if you're a college program? What more advanced topics are you going to still do the build, or are you going to just focus on programming with the vehicle? Pros and cons with that? Sorry, that was a big compound question. I don't know if where.
Yeah, one of the things I want to talk about was I'm an evaluation team leader last 25 years, and I've certified Warren Tech. I've certified this campus, and just we're trying to figure out where to fit this in and make sure we've got room for everything else. So that's something we're trying to feel our way through, and definitely this kit, it's the whole thing, right? If the students take it apart, put it back together, and get a basic understanding of how all the components work together, you can relate that to any EV on the planet. And then from there, the curriculum that Tom and a bunch of our fellow teachers worked on for the post-secondary level, they can go into a manufacturer program and have a huge head start in confidence and ability to be safe and understanding of the systems. Does that make sense? Did that answer the question? Okay. Yeah.
Just to dovetail on that for a second, some of our schools are using our product in particular as cross-platform, so they'll have it get built, and then you can have engineering students or physics students come in and say, well, this thing could be improved, so they can work with the builders to actually improve the car. One of my favorite stories is a high school that went around after an election and gathered up all the election signs off the lawns and fabricated a body. So they tested the energy consumption before, and then they added a body of all these election signs, which is a good use for them, I suppose, and then tested it again. So what we have is a platform, and what I say over and over again to people, we have a platform. I made it. I love it. It is what it is. But what makes it great is how it's being used. You have the creativity of the students and the instructors, and they're doing all kinds of things that I never really anticipated. And on the other hand, we do have the ability to go in and understand battery management, battery safety, how to get battery management system programmed so that it's within the safe tolerance ranges of the particular pack. Like people say it's got a lithium battery, and they just throw that term out there. Well, there's lithium cobalt, which Tesla used, and it's more susceptible to thermal runaway, because there's a few words that we never use, like thermal runaway is okay, but other words aren't. So So if we were going to convert the battery pack from what we use, which is lithium iron phosphate, which is less susceptible to thermal runaway, but it doesn't have the same power density. So I'm throwing some terms out there on purpose because those are the terms you need to learn, and that's what's going on. Everything has a cost. So you can have a really powerful lithium cobalt or lithium carbon or any of these high volatile combinations and get more speed and more range and higher energy density, and you pay for that with an occasional thermal runaway event. Or you can stick with something that's a little more conservative, like lithium iron phosphate, which, by the way, Tesla's finally smartened up and they're going that direction. Or there's a few other differences, but they all have a different voltage that they charge to. Lithium cobalt, maybe 4.1 volts per cell. Lithium iron phosphate, 3.4 volts per cell. And that can all be programmed in the battery management system, and that can all be trained so that a person knows what to look for. They can't just, as we experienced earlier, throw the turbocharger on there and expect it to all be the same. They know they have to look for things. That poor technician should have been trained to say, I don't know how to do this, or found the materials that he needed, but he wasn't even aware of that. So that's where we come in. That's where you as instructors are helping your students learn. They need to know which questions to ask.
One quick comment, and then I think we're about at time, but I'll give you the last word. But correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but one of the benefits here with the platform system that you're talking about for post-secondary shops, when you have that flexibility of going in, that open source kind of approach to a vehicle where you can go in and play with power curves and play with the BMS programming, you're able to get into a lot of the kind of programming questions and experiments that you wouldn't necessarily want to do on a Tesla, especially if it was loaned to you or something like that. There are things that you can only do on a Tesla that you can't do on a Switch, and there are things on a Switch that you wouldn't dare do on a Tesla. So it's having something that goes hand in hand there that's more modular, more visible, and more open source is kind of the idea behind the Switch. Correct? Yes? No?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Brian
Okay, great.
says yes.
All right, Brian says yes. Brian, you go ahead and have the last word, and then I'll just give you some information about lunch and stuff.
I got to tell you, there was a mention about, especially people of my generation that came up with hot rods, right? So it drives me crazy to no end when I take my 12-second Falcon that's got a stroke 302, 110 octane fuel up to Bandimere, and I run 12s, and here goes a Tesla by me and beats me by a second and a half. Just irks me to no end. So I can internalize what it feels like to lose internal combustion, but also I understand that we have to dive in, with both feet to figure out how to teach this to students, how to evolve our curriculums, and this is how we've chosen to do it.
Real quick, round of applause for our panelists and Peter.